The Swedish cuisine is the cuisine of the Swedish people. Due to Sweden's large north-south expanse, there are regional differences between the cuisine of the North Sweden and the South. Historically, in the far north, meats such as reindeer and other game dishes were eaten, some of which have the roots in the Sami culture, while fresh vegetables have played a larger role in the South. Many traditional dishes employ simple, contrasting flavors, such as the traditional dish of meatballs and brown cream sauce with tart, pungent Lingonberry Jam. Swedes have traditionally been very open to foreign influences, ranging from French cuisine during the 17th and 18th century, to the sushi and café latte of today. General features. Swedish cuisine could be described as centered around cultured dairy products, crisp and soft breads, berries and stone fruits, beef, chicken, lamb, pork, and seafood. Potatoes are often served as a side dish, often boiled. Swedish cuisine has a huge variety of breads of different shapes and sizes, made of rye, wheat, oat, white, dark, sourdough, and whole grain, and including flat breads and crisp breads. There are many sweetened bread types and some use spices. Many meat dishes, especially meatballs, have served with Lingonberry jam. Fruit soups with high viscosity, like rosehip soup and blueberry soup served hot to cold, are typical of Swedish cuisine. Butter and margarine are the primary fat sources, although olive oil is becoming more popular. Sweden's pastry tradition features a variety of yeast buns, cookies, biscuits and cakes. Many of them are in a very sugary style and often eaten with coffee are enormously popular in Sweden. History. The importance of fish has governed Swedish population and trade patterns far back in history. For preservation, fish were salted and cured. Salt became a major trade item at the dawn of the Scandinavian Middle Ages, which began circa 1000 AD. Cabbage preserved as sauerkraut and various kinds of preserved berries, apples, etc. were used once as a source of vitamin C during the winter. Lingonberry jam, still a favorite, may be the most traditional and typical Swedish way to add freshness to sometimes rather heavy food, such as steaks and stews. Sweden's long winters explain the lack of fresh vegetables in many traditional recipes. In older times, plants that would sustain the population through the winters were cornerstones. Various turnips such as the kallrot were gradually supplanted or complemented by the potato in the 18th century. A lack of distinct spices made everyday food rather bland by today's standards, although a number of local herbs and plants have been used since ancient times. This tradition is still present in today's Swedish dishes, which are still rather sparingly spiced. Both before and after this period, some new Germanic dishes were also brought in by immigrants, such as people related to the Hanseatic League, settling in Stockholm, Visby, and Kalmar. Swedish traders and aristocrats naturally also picked up some food traditions in foreign countries, cabbage rolls being one example. Cabbage rolls were introduced in Sweden by Karl XII, who came in contact with this dish at the time of the Battle of Poltava and during his campaign. The Turkish bender and later introduced by his Ottoman creditors, who moved to Stockholm in 1716. An early version of Karl Alma was first published in 1765 in the 4th edition of Hjälprederihushållningen för unga fruntimmer by Cabbage, though it was closer to the Turkish dolma than later dishes. Husmanskost. Swedish husmanskost denotes traditional Swedish dishes with local ingredients, the classical everyday Swedish cuisine. The word husmandskost stems from husman, meaning house owner, and the term was originally used for most kinds of simple countryside food outside of towns. Genuine Swedish husmandskost used predominantly local ingredients such as pork in all forms, fish, cereals, milk, potato, root vegetables, cabbage, onions, apples, berries, etc. Beef and lamb were used more sparingly. Beside berries, apples are the most used traditional fruit, eaten fresh or served as apple pie, apple sauce, or apple cake. Time-consuming cooking methods such as redninga and langkok are commonly employed and spices are sparingly used. Examples of Swedish husmandskost are pea soup, boiled and mashed carrots, potato and rutabaga served with pork, many varieties of salmon, varieties of herring, fish balls, meatballs, potato dumplings with meat or other ingredients, potato pancake, varieties of porridge, a fried mix of pieces of potato, different kind of meats, sausages, bacon and onion, meat stew with onion, and potato dumplings with a filling of onions and pork. Many of the dishes would be considered comfort food for the nostalgic value. Dishes akin to Swedish husmandskost and food traditions are found also in other Scandinavian countries. Details may vary. Sweden is part of the vodka belt, and historically distilled beverages, such as brännvin and snaps, have been a traditional daily complement to food. Consumption of wine in Sweden has increased during the last 50 years, partly at the expense of beer and stronger alcoholic beverages. In many countries, locally produced wines are combined with local husmandskost. Husmandskost has undergone a renaissance during the last decades as well-known Swedish chefs, such as Tor Redman, have presented modernized variants of classical Swedish dishes. In this nouvelle husman, the amount of fat is reduced and some new ingredients are introduced. The cooking methods are tinkered with as well, in order to speed up the cooking process or enhance the nutritional value or flavor of the dishes. Many Swedish restaurateurs mix traditional husmandskost with a modern, gourmet approach. Dishes. Swedish traditional dishes, some of which are many hundreds of years old, others perhaps a century or less, are still a very important part of Swedish everyday meals, in spite of the fact that modern-day Swedish cuisine adopts many international dishes. Internationally, the most renowned Swedish culinary tradition is the smorgasbord and, at Christmas, the julbord, including well-known Swedish dishes such as gravlax and meatballs. In Sweden, traditionally, Thursday has been soup day because the maids had half the day off and soup was easy to prepare in advance. One of the most traditional Swedish soups, ärtsoppa, is still served in many restaurants and households every Thursday, a tradition since the Middle Ages. Ärtsoppa is a yellow pea soup, served together with pancakes. This is a simple meal, a very thick soup, basically consisting of boiled yellow peas, a little onion, salt and small pieces of pork. It is often served with mustard and followed by thin pancakes. The Swedish armed forces also serve the conscripts pea soup and pancakes every Thursday. Potatoes are eaten year-round as the main source of carbohydrates, and are a staple in many traditional dishes. Not until the last 50 years have pasta or rice become common on the dinner table. There are several different kinds of potatoes. The most appreciated is the new potato, a potato which ripens in early summer, and is enjoyed at the traditional midsummer feast. New potatoes at midsummer are served with pickled herring, chives, sour cream, and the first strawberries of the year are traditionally served as dessert. The most highly regarded mushroom in Sweden is the chanterelle, which is considered a delicacy. The chanterelle is usually served as a side dish together with steaks, or fried with onions and sauce, served on an open sandwich. Second to the chanterelle, and considered almost as delicious, is the porcini mushroom, or Karl Johan's vamp, named after Charles XIV John, who introduced its use as food. In August, at the traditional feast known as Kraftskiva crayfish party, Swedes eat large amounts of crayfish, boiled and then marinated in a broth with salt, a little bit of sugar, and a large amount of dill weed. Some Swedish dishes are meals. Meals consists of breakfast in the early morning, a light lunch before noon, and a heavy dinner around 6 or 7 in the evening. It is also common to have a snack, often a sandwich or fruit, in between meals. In all primary schools, and most but not all secondary schools, a hot meal is served at lunch as part of Sweden's welfare state. Most Swedes also have a coffee break in the afternoon, often together with a pastry. Breakfast usually consists of open sandwiches, possibly crisp bread. The sandwich is most often buttered with toppings such as hard-cheesed cold cuts, caviar, masmore ham, and tomatoes or cucumber. Filjoke, or sometimes yogurt, is also traditional breakfast food, usually served in a bowl with cereals such as cornflakes, muesli, or knäckebröd, and sometimes with sugar, fruit or jam. Porridge is sometimes eaten at breakfast, made of rolled oats eaten with milk and jam or cinnamon with sugar. Common drinks for breakfast are milk, juice, tea, or coffee. Swedes are among the most avid milk and coffee drinkers in the world. Swedes sometimes have sweet toppings on the breads, such as jam or chocolate, although many older Swedes chose not to use these sweet toppings. However, orange marmalade on white bread is common, usually with morning coffee or tea. Many traditional kinds of Swedish bread, such as sirapslimpa, are somewhat sweetened in themselves, baked with small amounts of syrup. Like in many other European countries, there are also lots of non-sweetened breads, are often made with sourdough. Swedish breads may be made from whole grain, fine grain, or anything in between, and there are white, brown, and really dark varieties which are all common. Barkis or burgers is a localized version of challah, usually made without eggs and at first only available in Stockholm and Göteborg, where Jews first settled, but now available elsewhere. Main courses: seafood. A limited range of fish and other seafood is an important part of the Swedish cuisine. Farmed salmon from Norway has become increasingly popular, and pickled, sweetened herring, inlagged sill, is the most traditional of Swedish appetizers. Shrimp and lobster are specialties of the Skagerrak coast. There is also the fermented Baltic herring that, with its pungent aroma, is both loved and hated in Swedish. Surströmming. Desserts. Common desserts include pastries and treats. In recent years, American brownies, cookies, and cupcakes have become popular in Swedish cafe and restaurants. Kaffebröd, bakelser and other types of kaffebröd are various forms of pastries, pieces of cake, cookies, and buns that are usually consumed with coffee. Popular kinds of kaffebröd available in a traditional Swedish konditori include treats in the summer. Various seasonal fruit cakes are common. Strawberry and cream cake is highly regarded. Strawberries are also often eaten on their own with sugar and milk or cream. In the late summer and autumn, apple cakes and pies are baked. The apple cake is often served with vanilla custard, but sometimes with ice cream or whipped cream. During the winter holidays, traditional candy and pastries include candy. Other typical Swedish candy includes drinks. Sweden is one of the top 10 heaviest coffee-drinking countries in the world. Milk consumption in Sweden is also very high, second only to Finland. Milk is bought in milk cartons, and it is no coincidence that Tetra Pak, the world's largest maker of milk cartons, was founded in Sweden. Milk is considered the standard drink to have with meals during weekdays in many families, for both children and adults. Christmas beverages, sweet drinks, fruit soups, especially rosehip soup and bilberry soup, are eaten or drunk, usually hot during the winter. Liquor. The most important of stronger beverages in the Swedish cuisine is brandvin, which is a general term that includes mainly two kinds of beverages, akvavit and vodka. When consumed traditionally, it is often served as a snaps, but vodka is also popularly consumed as a drink ingredient. Renat is often considered to be the national vodka of Sweden, but other highly popular brands are Explorer vodka and Absolut vodka, the latter being one of the world's best-known liquor brands. Most forms of brandvin have around 40% alcohol. The production of hard liquor has a tradition dating back to the 18th century and was at a high in the 1840s. Since the 1880s, the state-owned Systembolaget has a monopoly on selling spirits with more than 3.5% alcohol, limiting access. Hembränt used to be made in rural Sweden, but production has lessened in recent years due to more liberal rules for the import of alcohol as well as increased smuggling. Punch is a traditional liqueur in Sweden that was immensely popular during the 19th century. It was adopted as the drink of choice by university students. Many traditional songs from that time are about the consumption of punch or are meant to be sung during the collective festivities that were part of the cultural life in the university's student associations at the time and still is. Beer is also widely consumed in Sweden, and the typical Swedish beer is lager of a bright and malty kind. The brands Pripps, Bla and Norrlands Guld are common examples. In the last few decades, many small breweries have emerged all over Sweden, offering a wide range of styles and brands. Nils Oskar Brewery, Douglas A. Lockporter Brewery and Narkultur Brewery are examples of these young Swedish microbreweries. Many microbreweries in Sweden are inspired by the U.S. craft beer movement. Brewing American styles are styles commonly associated with American craft breweries, e.g., American Pale Ale and American IPA. Food and Society. Broad Institute had once campaigned with a quotation from the Swedish National Board of Health and Welfare, recommending eating 6 to 8 slices of bread daily. Drinking milk has also been recommended and campaigned for by the Swedish National Board of Health and Welfare. It is often recommended to drink 2 to 3 glasses of milk per day. 52% of Swedes surveyed drink milk at least once a day, usually 1 glass with lunch and another glass or 2 in the evening or morning. Low-fat products, wholemeal bread and other alternatives are common. Grocery stores usually sell milk in 4 or 5 different fat levels, from 3% to 0.1%.